we've got a very powerful machine, and it exists in every industry, whether it's agriculture, communications, infectious disease, military defense, you name it. And they've are very well developed, very sophisticated. They've been around a long time, and they are determined to survive. And they're going to figure out a way to do it, one way or the other.
This is Kaiser Johnson with Liberty and Finance, and these are the Miles Franklin Weekly Specials for June 30th to July 6th, 2025, while supplies last. First this week, we feature backdated 1/10-ounce gold maples at just $45 over melt per coin. Next, 1-ounce silver Swiss Pamp rounds are just $2.59 over spot per ounce. 90% mixed junk constitutional silver is only 99 cents over spot. And finally, backdated 1-ounce platinum platypus coins are just $119 over spot per ounce. To order our specials or any of the many other options we have available, call us at 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237. We're available after hours and on weekends, and we look forward to speaking with you.
Welcome back to Liberty and Finance. We're delighted to have a returning guest today. Jeffrey Tucker is an author who is, among other things, a frequent contributor to the Epoch Times. He joins us again this Tuesday, July 1st, 2025. Jeffrey, thank you for coming back on Liberty and Finance.
That's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
One of the principles of liberty that I wanted to treat with you today was something that you examined quite closely in a recent article that you wrote. It actually took the cover page of the opinion section of the Epoch Times recently, the Supreme Court versus the experts.
Right.
And in that article, you examined the unscientific and illogical and, I guess, authoritarian techniques that were trotted out by so-called experts to take over and tell people, tell children, tell parents, tell the courts what people had to go along with, regardless of whether it made any sense or not, whether it had anything to do with logic, traditional understanding, true scientific method, and so on. That echoes a lot of the phenomenon that we have all lived through for the past 4 or so years, and are being told in many ways that there may be replays of some of those compulsory things coming our way, trying to control our speech, to force us to say certain things, to forbid us to say other things. It certainly affected this channel and others like ours, many of whom unfortunately got deplatformed over the past 4 years for talking about important topics related to medical treatments that people might not have wanted or that might not have been safe or effective, and a lot of other topics regarding freedom of movement, freedom of speech, freedom to do our jobs, freedom to travel. We'd like to talk with you about the principles that you break into in this article, because, well, one of them is about science itself, the very nature of science versus what's been trotted out and touted as settled science and shouldn't be questioned, or even, I know Fauci had a famous quote where he said, if you're against me, you're against science, because I represent science. Could you start us there with this idea of why we've been, or not why, but in what ways we've been subject to unscientific forces in the name of science, in the color of science, to try to control our behavior over the past several years?
The worse the science has gotten, the more they insist that it's a fixed dogma. It's settled, and you can't look into it. And that's true for climate change, on transgender ideology, on infectious disease, on vaccines. I mean, you go through the list. It's huge. And so what they're trying to do is shut down what they call disinformation, which is just people who disagree with the regime. The Supreme Court decision was very much welcome. This one concerned the application of Title IX, which is designed to bolster women's sports and things like that, whether it applied to transgenderism, which is a little bit absurd because you can't just hack off some body parts and flounce around a dress and claim that you're entitled to protection from Title IX. I mean, it's outrageous, and the fact the Supreme Court came down on the right side of this is, I guess, welcome, but it's also just, I don't know how they could have done otherwise. And particularly the dissenting opinion here is very interesting because the dissent cited the American Medical Association, the American Pediatric Society, something like that, and about 5 different other organizations, all of which have rallied around the transgender cause, and then a concurring opinion by Clarence Thomas, Justice Thomas, said, let's just be clear that the experts have been wrong, famously so, and the science is not settled, and you can cite all these experts you want, but it's not going to make any difference in the application of law. We have to pay attention to realities, and the reality is that there are men, there are women, and Title IX is supposed to apply to women, and that means like what you think it means, and not some other weird thing. So I was grateful for that, just this brutal takedown, and I was especially glad because. When after the lockdowns happened in 2020, I kept thinking the courts were going to jump in and say, "Hey, wait a minute! You can't shut people's churches." You can't close their businesses. You can't stop their freedom of speech. We've got a Bill of Rights. You can't stop people from traveling and, that sort of thing. But they did it anyway, and the courts didn't speak out. And when they started speaking out, this is say a year later, 2021, the very first thing they started citing was the science, So courts would not rule on matters of COVID because they said the experts said this thing is a very dangerous disease that's controlled by violating your rights. Therefore, we're going to violate your rights, and that's okay. And that's what the courts were saying. And it was depressing to me because I thought, oh no, we've got Constitution, we have 500 years of legal precedent, on behalf of human rights and liberties. And if the U.S. can't, rally itself to defend these principles because the experts are all powerful, we've got a major problem. So that's what they finally did come around, and so I hope that this concurring dissent from Justice Thomas really sticks. I mean, you can't just be consulting with Anthony Fauci on the right not to wear a mask or whatever on public transit. So that was really decisive, but it's been interesting to see how the court has generally approached these questions. They've just been kind of each decision they've been taking on now for a few years has been progressively better. And that decision, about which I wrote in that article, was followed by another one that came out that concerned immigration and presidential prerogatives to control executive agencies. And that one is a kind of a follow-up on this Title IX decision. But it's actually even more substantive and really lays down the law. It says if an agency exists under the executive department, the executive can control it, and not 600 any one of 632 judges that can issue nationwide injunctions. And I welcome this opinion, not because I want the president to be a dictator, but because it's nice to have things put in boxes, some clarity about the org chart, and so the Supreme Court has done that. They reinforced Article 2, Section 1, which is the president is the head of the executive branch, period. It's the first decision in 100 years that's been so clear on that point. Another
element that you focused on in there was the you didn't say weaponization of our empathy, but you said our tolerance was being abused. Can you expand on that? Because I think this is, again, applied across, has been used as a weapon against the people, against our rights, against our Constitution on a wide range of issues in the last decade.
Western people are nice people. We're liberal. We're tolerant. We want everybody to be able to shape their own realities, and that's great. And it's been this way with the transgender issue from the very beginning. Some respected colleague suddenly says, I've decided to join the other half and become a woman. And you're sort of, oh, that's a little weird, but okay. And so everybody was willing to go along with that. Just based on sense of not wanting to hurt their feelings, and we all know somebody, who's done this, and everybody puts up with it, and that was fine for a while until, sure enough, it just wasn't a matter of too many years before the courts got involved and started saying you can't discriminate, you have to use preferred pronouns, you cannot block this weird drag show from being at the school, and also parents can't object if the school counselor says your daughter is really a son, then to deny that person access to treatments, gender affirming treatments, as they say, then you're violating their rights. So, and at that point, it just becomes too much, and you realize that this is all just a maneuver to abuse our sense of tolerance and go along with what's essentially a lie. A violation of family autonomy, a grotesque, a disgusting, even criminal level of mutilation of the children. And when you start looking at it that way, this is not just a matter of tolerance. This is something else. This is horrifying attack on human life itself. Horrifying. I mean, my own personal opinion is every doctor who's ever performed one of these surgeries needs to go to jail or something. I mean, they definitely should be stopped. They would be stopped in any kind of civilized society. But it's been allowed to go on based on this trickery, because once you give in and, you're willing to call it he or she, and, and just because some dude's flouncing around in high heels, you hold the chair for him or whatever, that's the way it starts. But it ends with the school counselor telling your son he has to cut off his genitals, So at that point, or poison them with pharmaceuticals. And you realize that at some point that our patience has been abused, and I'm particularly intrigued with the gender issue. Is interesting because it's utterly and completely wholly reliant on medical services, psychiatric services, and pharmaceutical products. These are very powerful industries, and they're constantly looking for new markets, and they're voracious. And when they seize on the children, they said, we're going to change the boys to girls and the girls to boys, thanks to our wonderful products, our poisons and our medicine, our knives, our surgeries, and our school counselors. Then we've got a major problem. And at some point, I think that point is now. People just have to say, this has got to stop. This is cruel. This is actually evil. So I'm grateful to the Supreme Court for seeing that this is true.
Yeah, Canadian psychologist Jordan Peterson refers to it as the plot of liars and butchers, and I thought that was a good summarization as well. But it's been applied not only medically, but also to the very integrity of our country and its borders, et cetera. We're just supposed to, out of our empathy, out of our caring for, and this is the theme that keeps getting trotted out is, you don't want to be a granny killer, so you got to stay home and not go out and you have to do all that. You have to not mind that uncontrolled millions are coming across the border from, 100 different countries, all unvetted and military age, et cetera. You're supposed to not care about any of that just because you're a caring person. So, in other words, commit national suicide or medical or financial, or keep on going down the list, just because you have empathy for others. It's being twisted and abused. Any other aspects of that you think are worthy of mention?
Well, I think what you've got here on the part of governments and their leaders and the professional societies and industries that serve them is a kind of psychopathology at work. Or sociopathology, people who prey on your generosity and your credulity, to manipulate you for sympathy and money, invitations to your dinner parties, whatever it's going to be, they're not good people. They've people who have figured you out and are abusing your generosity, your charity, and your empathy. And sometimes it takes people a long time to figure out who in their own lives is this way. But I guess what I would suggest is that we've got an entire Leviathan state that is this way. They figured it out. So they figured out the language to use, democracy, safe and effective, tolerance, equal rights for all, non-discrimination, whatever the slogan of the day is going to be. And at some point, we just have to look at it and realize what's going on, and just say no. Just say no to this stuff. And the Supreme Court's doing that right now. And I hope it's something of a turning point. I don't know if it is, but I'm just grateful that I'm sorry it had to come to this, really. I'm deeply saddened about all the lives that have been ruined in the meantime. The number of mutilated children and others who have had to put up with this hideous experimentation on them. But I think it's time that we, sort of man up and talk about reality. The transgender case is particularly weird because it obsesses about genitalia as if manufacturing some gendered organ is through surgery is somehow changes you into something else, forgetting that we've got the difference between male and female is essentially chromosomal and affects thousands, if not millions, of different features of our bodily functioning. It's just not possible for one to become the other. And to think that we live in times where to say that is considered politically incorrect or right wing or something is just utterly preposterous. I think in the U.S., the movement that's rallied around transgenderism has essentially ruined the left. It's made because it just flies in the face of what everybody knows to be true, and you can't have a movement that's going to do that, or maybe you can until somebody calls it out. And then just says what's true. Matt Walsh's film, What is a Woman, just kind of makes the point, It was a great movie. But all we have to do is just say what's true. And it's not complicated. You just have to say what everybody knows to be true, and then the entire regime just kind of falls apart. But we just need to get better at being courageous about doing that. And that article that you held up was interesting for me because it took me many years finally to write this. I'm actually personally embarrassed about how long I went along with this whole thing. Based on a libertarian sense of people can do whatever they want to with their bodies, and it's not up to me to say what it is, but which is fine. That's a fine principle. But let's not lose the courage just to tell the truth. And I'm sorry it took me so long just to say that. I was expecting a little more blowback from that article than I got. But that's why I approached the subject kind of cautiously and a little bit sympathetically with the people who have tolerated this and even the people who have done it to themselves. They're living a lie and we're enabling them. That's not good.
Well, and there's a lot of victims along the way, as you mentioned, who have been irreparably harmed through this. As with the border crisis, out of empathy for let's be welcoming of the stranger and so on, there's been huge undercurrents of child trafficking and sex trafficking and human trafficking, as well as potential invasion of our country with sleeper cells of potential terrorism activity and evidence in multiple municipalities and so on, that people who have no intention of assimilating into the American culture or conforming to our Constitution, but trying to assert their own no-go zones and their own types of non-American law in different areas, and the judges looking the other way or police looking the other way in against even violent actions in these areas. So it just seems to keep echoing over and over in many areas where we're told, oh, it's for the climate, oh, it's for the children, oh, it's for the foreigners who's coming here. It is always this, oh, it's for Granny who needs to be protected from you. Why we have to suspend reality, suspend science, suspend our better judgment, suspend all our knowledge from history, suspend the Constitution. Anyway, yeah, I think we've...
Well, on the immigration point in particular, that's fascinating because it exploits a little bit of a hole in our civic culture. Namely, it's been many, many generations since we've talked, frankly, about the meaning of citizenship itself, which is funny because we imagine ourselves to be democratic societies, by which I mean not just the vote, but the capacity for there to be a feedback loop between what the public wants and how the regime behaves, and the mechanism that enables that finally is being enfranchised. To be a citizen means that you have the opportunity to vote, and so under those conditions, plebiscites are always going to be local or regional or national. We have no such thing as a global plebiscite. So if you want to preserve democracy, then you have to have some standards concerning citizenship, who's in, who's out, because if you don't have that, then you're going to surrender everything to a global administrative state like the World Health Organization or the UN or something like that, or a global capital or whatever it's going to be. You're going to give up all your volition and turn it over to the blob that you cannot control. So the only mechanism we have as modern people to restrain or otherwise impact the shape of the regime under which we live is, in fact, the vote, which depends fundamentally on distinguishing between citizens and non-citizens. But somehow in the U.S., we just kind of let go of that, based on the Statue of Liberty or whatever. We said, oh, yeah, whoever's here, whatever, they can take my tax dollars, they can vote just like me, we'll give them free cell phones and fancy apartments in New York City. It's preposterous. I mean, you can't preserve anything remotely resembling a free democratic society under these conditions. And again, this is an issue that I hadn't... 10 years ago, was I thinking about this topic? No, never even occurred to me, to think about the meaning of citizenship and how it impacts us. But we better start thinking about it, because once we go this direction, where citizenship means nothing, and it's come one, come all, then you're necessarily relinquishing the essential mechanisms that make it possible for there to be some kind of feedback loop between the people and the rulers, as mediated by plebiscites. And if you don't have that, then you don't have anything. I mean, it's a very fragile situation. I mean, what we call democracy fundamentally relies on the workingness of this mechanism. And if you just break it, then there's nothing to stand between you and the totalitarian state.
That's exactly where I thought you were going to bring that. That's exactly right. And we've certainly seen over the past, another aspect of this, another ugly aspect of this over the past 4 years of what we've been through, is this abdication of accountability at the local level all the way up the chain. It's like, well, yeah, we're locking you down, we're taking away all your rights, but that's just because we're following guidelines, and then we're following guidelines at the state level, and then at the national level, and then at the international level, and pretty soon you feel like you're in a Franz Kafka novel where you have no idea who these people are that are the ones that are actually pulling the strings at the top, but it's it's a club that you're not in, and that you can't influence.
And once you go that direction, there's no turning back. One of the things that Western society has always had is, in the case of trials, we have trial by jury, and oddly, that's something that survived. Now, it's kind of not working as well as it might in issues of civic cases, but at least in criminal law, it's still the case that we know what a crime is when you do really bad things to other people. And if it goes to trial, you're going to get a trial by your jury. So you will have the accused there, and the jurors are drawn from a jury pool of average people, and they're brought in, and they're presented the facts and a case from both sides. Our culture provides. If you can't afford to be defended, we have public defenders who are there for you, and they want to win their cases as badly as anybody else because it's good for their careers and so on. And the jurors sit and listen to the facts, and they make a judgment. Not the judge, not the attorneys present, nobody else, but just the people. And it's a remarkable system if you think about it. Like, we have to trust that people are intelligent enough to look at the facts and assess the case and rule based on them, in the case of the U.S., beyond a reasonable doubt, that this person is guilty, even though he's presumed to be innocent. The overwhelming evidence of the facts suggests he's guilty, and then the judge can pronounce a sentence that the jury doesn't determine. But the jury is the people are ultimately empowered to decide based on the evidence the guilt and innocence of the party in question. So that is a remarkable system, and it's not one that exists in totalitarian societies or primitive societies. It exists in societies that trust the people with these profound matters of the administration of justice. I mean, that is a remarkable kind of trust. And those systems still survive, and actually, despite all the problems, despite the costs, the delays, and all the inevitable problems, that core of the system is still very much working as intended, and that you have to think about how much we should treasure that. We could live in a system where you have no right to be present at your trial, where there is no jury of your peers, where just some mucky muck just pronounces you guilty and send you away for life, and you have no recourse, no access to attorneys. I mean, that's generally not the case in Western society, and that's worth defending. I think, that's an actual part of our system that still fundamentally relies on the power of the people, the intelligence of the people, the willingness of the people to participate in their self-regulation, self-management, administration of justice. And our laws and traditions to sustain that. But if we're going to have that kind of system, we also have to have a system that decides who the people are and make sure they're well educated and they're respectful of our traditions. And I think once you give that up, you give up essentially everything.
Yeah, and when you focus on the people, it echoes the line of "we the people" at the beginning of the Constitution. In order to have a ordered society, do hereby ordain or establish this Constitution, and we're going to delegate certain, powers to protect our God-given rights because they belong to us intrinsically, to we the people. And there's another aspect of this that tends not to get talked about in the public square, and I'm going to traipse into it here, and that is the idea of that our country was founded on beliefs that are also moral in basis and for believing people, and the idea that we were created, endowed by our Creator with inalienable rights, that's right there in our founding documents, that gets into part of what we've been talking about in this discussion as well, because at least in the Christian tradition, God himself said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." So, because you said in your article, you talked about it's refreshing that Justice Thomas is appealing to reality being the truth. So rather than us just taking the word of experts and veering off into some untrue or falsehood, and in theology, God created the world and God is the truth, and it's the deceiver, the prince of lies, who wants to twist and distort. He can't create anything on his own, but he can sure good at twisting and distorting, calling things what they're not, trying to get you to think about things in an upside down way. And it certainly seemed to many of our subscribers and viewers that that's the direction that our society, even at the highest levels of officialdom in the White House and in the press, were headed over the past half decade at least, where everything seemed upside down. What was ever acceptable traditionally was now called evil. Whatever was considered aberrant or illogical or unscientific or crazy or whatever was now considered virtuous, and you had to adopt it, and you were going to be compelled, and you would be eliminated from even being able to participate in society eventually if you didn't sell out.
Yeah, and what's remarkable about these last 5 years is that we've been surrounded by evidence that this we did see in front of us invented a kind of a counter religion with its own liturgy and protocols. It's funny because people make fun of Catholics when they go into church and put holy water on themselves and make a sign of cross and say, well, what kind of crazy nonsense do you believe? But during COVID, people would perform the most wild antics, dancing around other people that got closer than 6 feet. They would wear a mask standing up and then take it off while sitting down. Standing up, but now I've got to go to the bathroom, so I put on the mask and take it off. And people were very brutally enforcing this stuff. So people were performing these preposterous rituals that were just made up out of whole cloth by some guy, and posed without even the presence of law that anybody voted on, just administrative edicts, and people were compliant with it, So it was just nuts. Say what you want to about holy water, at least it's got a long basis of tradition. The COVID protocols were invented the day before yesterday. So
yeah, and we got to see some rather interesting footage of meetings at the global organizations where representatives from multiple countries coming, with all getting their photographs, all standing together with their masks on, and then all taking their masks off for another group photo afterwards. And that kind of breach of trust that really, James Rawls from survivalblog.com coined the statement. He says, we're living in the age of deception and betrayal. And many good people felt both deceived and betrayed in many ways over the past. If we could, with your permission, turn our attention to the next year, maybe, we don't know. We've been told to watch out, because it's not Santa Claus that's coming. It's going to be the next pandemic. It's going to be much more virulent and deadly than the last one. And we just had Alex Newman also contributed at the Epoch Times on last night, and he talked about a poly crisis that he's imagining would be, where it will be not just one thing, but there'll be financial, and there'll be military, and there'll be health, and there'll be weather, and all kinds of effects brought to up the ante. And we saw 7x24 complicity of the major media in just basically carpet bombing people's minds during the last crisis to always focus on what would keep them in a reactive and fearful state, be more susceptible to control of these illogical directives. Any thoughts or insights from you on what you expect might be headed our way in the future, or be how we should prepare ourselves, our families, our communities, our states to be
the UN is definitely working on new pandemics, no question, but even in absence of that, the invention of new maladies just out of whole cloth. I mean, it's a very interesting thing happened in the U.S. the other day. A new committee called ACIP, not a new committee, but a newly constituted committee called ACIP was supposed to vote on a new shot for all the kids called, it's an RSV shot, RSV, which, people were saying online, I've never heard of RSV before COVID. I mean, how is this possible? But now we have an RSV shot, and they were presented with all sorts of just a blizzard of data at the last minute right before the vote. And many of the members of the panel had no basis to say the way, but knowing for sure that if they voted no, they'd have to explain themselves. So they voted yes, then everybody give them a break, right? So only one of the new 8 panelists on this committee, Retsef Levy, bothered to, well, I don't want to put down the other people, but he actually looked in advance and found that CDC was hiding all sorts of data, namely that in the trials, the placebo performed better than the shot itself, and the shot was associated with very high safety signals. So he voted no. And I'm not sure that's ever happened. He didn't win, by the way, but I don't think anything like that has ever happened before. So I only mention this case just to say there's a lot of tricks. They have a lot of tricks up their sleeves. We've got a very powerful machine, and it exists in every industry, whether it's agriculture, communications, infectious disease, military defense, you name it. And they've are very well developed, very sophisticated. They've been around a long time, and they are determined to survive. And they're going to figure out a way to do it, one way or the other. And now that they're starting to get a little bit of pushback, they're trying to crush us because of it. And we are, no question, our side is completely outnumbered by their side. They've got trillions and trillions of dollars and millions of employees and tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of enterprises. We just have a handful of brave intellectuals, who are not connected, who just happen to have a temporary amount of influence. And so we have to move fast to dismantle the system. I'm not at all confident we can achieve it, by the way, but it's certainly worth doing. And our people are trying the best they possibly can right now.
Well, we're grateful for your presence with us. We'd like to have you back again as soon as we can mutually arrange that on our schedules, and we're grateful for this time together. If people want to follow your work on a more regular basis than your visits here, where's the best place for them to get connected?
.org is my institute that I run, and I always like everybody to sign up for emails there, so it's our only way to get in contact with you. We send one email a week, which is just a reminder of all the articles we published this week and a few announcements about events and that sort of thing. Otherwise, my mostly social media home is X, because it's the least censored, so I post there all the time. But I appreciate you having me on.
We're grateful very much, Jeffrey Tucker, for your being here with us on Liberty and Finance. And folks, if you don't want to miss a single episode with Jeffrey or any of our other guests, make sure you're on our free mailing list. Just go to libertyandfinance.com, put in your email address, click submit, make sure you confirm on the confirming email. You'll get one email in your inbox per day. We won't share your email address with anyone. And that in that one email, you'll get our latest interviews with each of our guests, including Jeffrey, and any weekly specials that we have, so you won't miss a thing. And once again, Jeffrey, thank you for being here on Liberty and Finance.
Thank you.
This is Kaiser Johnson with Liberty and Finance, and these are the Miles Franklin weekly specials for June 30th to July 6th, 2025, while supplies last. First this week, we feature backdated 1/10 ounce gold maples at just $45 over melt per coin. Next, 1 ounce silver Swiss Pamp rounds are just $2.59 over spot per ounce. 90% mixed junk constitutional silver is only 99 cents over spot. And finally, backdated 1 ounce platinum platypus coins are just $119 over spot per ounce. To order our specials or any of the many other options we have available, call us at 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237. We're available after hours and on weekends, and we look forward to speaking with you.